So both of you have obviously been incredibly successful in centering health equity, and equity and climate justice in all of your efforts. It's core to both of your careers so far. Can you share some of the lessons that you've learned, and some of the strategies that you use to make sure that equity is not, taking a back seat to making sure that, the folks whose health is disproportionately being affected, or whose lives are disproportionately being affected by climate change, are really at the center of everything that you do? Dylan?
Sure. Yeah, and I think it's really based on the simple premise, and I wrote about this a little bit on the Sea Change blog, but it's just allowing folks to claim their own narratives, own their own narratives, and I think often too, I think the numbers, the stats, or even like the final like stories often don't get back to the community. So it's just something we've been thinking around. It's just like how do we ensure that those folks are guiding the message from beginning to end, because I think folks are either like invited to the table that's already like set, so the discussion is already set, and like okay, you're here, and then after this, we just go back, and we're never gonna be in discussion again. Or it's often like folks like helicopter into communities, and then they're like off, and then like the data, the story, the final story just like never gets back to them. So I think that's something we've been also thinking to do in terms of like how do we engage folks and tell the stories, and ensuring that folks can like throughout the entire process really lead the narratives that and lead it on their own terms. I think has really been the core. And I think this is when we also get to like spokespeople and who is represented and how they're represented. I think this idea around changing the narrators to like change the narrative, I think has been like a core like premise around all the work that we were doing as we think through like the youth-led climate movement, is like ensuring that that is a core, and then also like ensuring that we're shifting power and really authentically centering and elevating BIPOC youth who are often leading the organizing, but don't think the media narrative is often that that way. So I think we've also been like trying to push back on that front too. Is like often it's BIPOC youth who are actually on the ground, well, one most impacted, and then also on the ground organizing. But I do think it's often not highlighted through media, and that's a kind of a failure on like all sides, like the media, and kind of is attraction to like spokespeople, and then also like we also just have some work to do to ensuring that those folks vision and mission is often told through the narratives and amplified and allowed them to tell it. So I said like really this idea around shifting power and also just like elevating, allowing folks to tell their own stories on their own terms has really been like the two most important things to think through like post climate strikes, and as we like as folks like there's rumblings of like striking again and organizing again, and I think that has really been the core, is like ensuring that we're doing that intentionally in order to continue expanding out the movement and also continue to be authentically elevating those folks who are disproportionately impacted.
That's so great, Dylan. I really love what you said, and I guess I would add, or speak maybe to the scientists who are watching, about some of what I see as kind of the necessary prerequisites, if you will, for authentic um, engagement of diverse communities in climate justice research, and also how we reflect on the work that we're doing, and uh, try to hone it to advance, as you are saying, or like keep the focus on health equity and climate justice. And I would say, one is to recognize our own subjectivity and our knowledge, and to value the expertise that comes from lived experience. We like to think that science is objective, but really we all bring our own experience and subjectivity to the work, and you really can't help but do that. And so, you see it in even what type of questions or subjects you choose to investigate, right? If not in the methods themselves. And so, just recognizing that, having some humility around that, and placing value on other ways of knowing. and that come from lived experience, that come, not out of the classroom, not out of scientific ways of knowing. And then second, I would say, be open about acknowledging the harm that science has done to communities. And my own discipline of public health certainly does not have a unblemished track record here in terms of actually inflicting damage on Black and brown bodies. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that history in order to move forward in dismantling that legacy. And then third, I would say, there's so much great scholarship on this, and I'm thinking in particular of a piece that I would refer to folks to that Dr. Tony Reams authored last fall in, I believe it was Nature Human Behavior. He talked about a call for authentic Black engagement in the academy and beyond, and gives really great questions, that all academics should be asking themselves in this moment. And he talks about, what does authentic engagement look like? So if you've, reached the point and you're ready to engage with BIPOC communities, with communities beyond the academy, is that engagement really authentic, and is the partnership equal? Are the collaborators being respected and compensated appropriately for their contributions to the work? And I think, more broadly, thinking about how we surround ourselves with and support people of color in becoming scientists and doing the work themselves. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought, but it's clear that we have a crisis of representation in the academy, also in environmental science, environmental studies, and our standard operating procedures in terms of mentorship, career advancement, retention, all of that aren't working, right? It's time to reimagine those. And I think a part of that, or a big part of that, is really thinking about how do we decenter whiteness and white culture in the academy, because until we do that, I think that goal is going to be hard to realize. And the goal of what Dillon's talking about, right, which is people telling their own stories, is going to be out of reach.
Yeah, and I would just say quickly on the messaging point, I think that's something, as I was like, because I kind of, I say I stumbled into this kind of space, but I mean, not the truth, but I did stumble a bit. And I think that's something that I think was super interesting as I was kind of expanding myself into this space. Is like I, as a teen, which was like literally a few years ago, I was really taught climate change as as global warming, just as like polar bears, and like that was the extent. So there's commentary there on education. So I'll leave that aside, but like in terms of just like messaging and like spokespeople and like ownership of narratives, I think that's something that just across climate justice, like generally speaking, across every element, it's just like there's so much work, and I think we're now like it's exciting to see that folks are doing the work, and like we're all trying to like do the work, understanding that like time is not on our side. But so I think there's something to that, some powerful around like all of us coming together and recognizing that this is, it is too late, but it's not too late. But I think that is also something I think through on like, how do we message this? It's just like me, myself, I'm coming at this, at my work, understanding that folks like me aren't necessarily in these rooms. So I think that's something I think as a movement, I think we're really trying to like open this door and ensure that it stays open, and that throughout the process that folks can really just allow themselves to lead and claim their stories throughout it.